I thought I was just visiting my friend, until his mom whispered, "Don't worry. I'll take care of everything." And just like that, nothing would ever feel the same. The day had been long and draining, the kind where even the familiar feels heavy. I found myself at my friend's doorstep, drawn more by the need for a brief escape than by any real purpose. The door opened, and there she was, my friend's mother, standing with effortless grace in the doorway. She was in her early 40s, confident but with a softness that made her approachable, a quiet elegance that seemed both natural and deliberate. Her hair fell in gentle waves around her shoulders, catching the light in a way that made it almost glow. "Hey," she said, her voice calm and warm, like sunlight spilling through a window. There was an ease in her tone that immediately made me feel less like a guest and more like someone she genuinely cared about. Her smile was subtle, yet something about the way her eyes lingered on mine, steady, observant, patient, made me acutely aware of the gap between us, not just in age, but in experience. She guided me into the living room with a simple hand on my shoulder. It was brief, almost casual, yet the warmth of her touch lingered far longer than expected. The room smelled faintly of vanilla and clean linen, with the muted glow of a late afternoon sun filtering through sheer curtains. It was cozy, inviting, a small world removed from the chaos outside. As I slumped into a chair, exhausted, she moved with quiet assurance around the room, adjusting pillows, straightening a throw blanket. Her movements were fluid and deliberate, each gesture carrying an understated grace. I found myself noticing the subtleties, the curve of her fingers as she brushed her hair behind her ear, the gentle tilt of her head when she glanced at me, the way her smile deepened when she spoke softly to put me at ease. "You look like you've had a rough day," she murmured, almost as if reading the tension from my posture. Her voice was low, intimate, and comforting. Without hesitation, she leaned just slightly closer, her presence filling the space between us without words. Then, almost under her breath, she said, "Don't worry. I'll take care of everything." It was the kind of reassurance that made my chest tighten in unexpected ways. Simple words, yet they carried warmth, empathy, and an unspoken promise. For a moment, I was struck by the quiet authority in her tone, the calm steadiness that contrasted so sharply with the turmoil I had been feeling. I realized, with a mix of guilt and fascination, that I was drawn in, not just by her beauty or charm, but by the unspoken strength and care in her presence. The day's weight seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a curious, almost thrilling awareness that something in this encounter was quietly shifting, and I didn't know if I was ready to understand it. The day had begun to blur into something softer, quieter, as I settled into the gentle rhythm of my friend's home. She appeared again, carrying a tray with 2 steaming mugs, tea, slightly fragrant with hints of chamomile and honey. The warmth of the ceramic seeped through my fingers as I took it from her, and I noticed the subtle way her hand lingered near mine, brushing briefly before she withdrew. The contact was fleeting but enough to send an unexpected awareness through me. She asked casually how I'd been, but it wasn't the kind of small talk that asks for a rehearsed answer. Her gaze was patient, attentive, as if she genuinely wanted to understand, to see past the surface. I hesitated at first, fumbling for words, feeling the weight of fatigue and frustration from the day. Yet something in the warmth of her eyes, the tilt of her head as she listened, gave me permission to speak freely. I told her about the pressures I'd been carrying, uncertainty at work, moments of self-doubt that I rarely shared with anyone. She listened, nodding gently, her presence like a steady anchor. Occasionally, her fingers brushed the table near mine, a delicate touch that felt intentional, grounding, yet unintrusive. There was a quiet rhythm to her attentiveness, a blend of empathy and calm authority that made it impossible not to relax in her company. At one point, I found myself leaning forward, drawn in by the warmth of her presence. She noticed and, with a soft smile, placed her hand lightly over mine. The contact was brief but electrifying in its subtlety, warm, steady, and reassuring. Her voice was low and comforting, barely above a whisper, "Don't worry. I'll take care of everything." The words settled into me like a balm, easing the tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. There was something magnetic about her care, not just the words, but the quiet certainty behind them. She radiated a sense of strength and calm that made the chaos of my thoughts feel distant. At the same time, the intimacy of her attention, the softness in her gestures, the light brushing of her fingers, sparked an awareness I couldn't ignore. I caught myself watching her hands, the subtle way she shifted her weight, the gentle cadence of her voice. By the end of the conversation, I felt lighter, yet strangely unsettled, as if I had glimpsed a side of life I hadn't known existed, one where someone could care for me so completely, so quietly, that I could let go of the walls I usually held around myself. And though I knew the age difference between us should have kept me grounded, it didn't. Her presence had a way of gently pulling me in, awakening something tender and forbidden yet undeniably comforting. After that quiet afternoon, I began to notice her in a different light. It wasn't just her warmth or the comfort she exuded, it was the little ways she moved through the house, the subtle gestures that hinted at attentiveness and care, and the way her presence seemed to linger long after she had passed. She was cooking when I wandered into the kitchen, and the aroma of fresh herbs and garlic filled the air, mingling with the soft scent of her perfume. I found myself watching her unconsciously, captivated by the graceful way she chopped vegetables, the gentle curve of her fingers, and the quiet focus in her eyes. She noticed me hovering, and instead of asking me to leave, she smiled, a little knowing, as if she were aware of the silent tension. "You're welcome to help," she said softly, her voice low and intimate, carrying that familiar calm reassurance. I hesitated, but then moved closer, my hands awkwardly trying to mirror her practiced motions. Her hand brushed mine while guiding the knife, fleeting but electric, brief enough to feel like a spark yet subtle enough to leave me unsettled in the best possible way. Later, we sat on the couch with mugs of tea, a soft afternoon light filtering through the curtains, casting patterns of gold and shadow across the room. We were close enough that our shoulders occasionally touched, but far enough to maintain a respectful distance. I caught myself stealing glances at her, the gentle slope of her cheek, the way her hair fell over her shoulder, the curve of her lips as she smiled. Each time our eyes met, there was a beat of silence that felt loaded with unspoken meaning. She laughed softly at something I said, and her hand brushed my arm, deliberate yet casual. My heart raced, awareness sharp, as I realized this tension between us was growing, quiet but undeniable. The age difference, which had once felt like a solid wall, now felt more like a gentle boundary, one that heightened the intensity of our connection rather than diminishing it. In that quiet room, I felt something stirring within me, admiration, fascination, and a strange, tender longing. She was aware of it too, I could sense it in her measured glances, the way she leaned slightly closer without overstepping, the warmth in her touch that spoke more than words ever could. By the end of that afternoon, the tension had become a silent language between us. Each glance, each brush of a hand, each shared smile carried more weight than it should, yet it was neither rushed nor forced. It was the beginning of something delicate and profound, a slow-burn connection that promised to unravel more of itself in time. And in that realization, I felt both excitement and a careful hesitation, knowing that the story between us was only just beginning. The quiet of the evening wrapped around the house like a soft blanket. Outside, the sky had darkened to a deep navy, the occasional rustle of leaves carried through the open window with the faint chill of night. Inside, the living room glowed in the gentle warmth of a single lamp, casting soft shadows that flickered across the walls. I found myself sitting beside her again, though this time the atmosphere felt different, heavier, more charged with an unspoken expectation. I hesitated before speaking, aware of the vulnerability settling in my chest. There were truths I hadn't shared with anyone, insecurities I usually kept buried under jokes or deflections. But in her presence, there was a safety I hadn't anticipated, a quiet permission to be seen, really seen, without judgment. I've been feeling like I'm barely keeping it together, I admitted, my voice low, almost hesitant. Everything feels like it's slipping through my fingers, and I don't know where to start. Her gaze softened immediately. She leaned slightly closer, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that invited connection. Her hand hovered near mine on the armrest, and when it finally settled there, the warmth of her touch was grounding, steadying. I understand, she whispered. It's okay to feel lost sometimes. You don't have to face everything alone. The simple words wrapped around me, but it was the way she said them, calm, deliberate, full of quiet assurance, that truly struck me. I looked at her, noticing the faint lines around her eyes that deepened when she smiled, the subtle curve of her lips, and the ease with which her presence seemed to fill the room. For a moment, all my walls felt unnecessary. I was a young man standing at the edge of something I didn't fully understand, and yet I trusted her. She didn't rush me, didn't fill the silence with empty encouragement. Instead, her hand remained lightly on mine, her thumb brushing in small, almost imperceptible circles. I could feel the heat radiating from her, the gentle pressure that spoke of patience and care. Her proximity, the way her shoulder nearly touched mine, the warmth of her breath as she spoke softly, all combined into a subtle tension, unspoken, yet undeniably present. I realized, with a mix of awe and hesitation, that my feelings were shifting. There was admiration, certainly, but also a quiet longing I hadn't expected. And she seemed to notice, in the careful way she maintained closeness without overstepping, in the tender reassurance that lingered in every glance, every gentle gesture. By the end of that night, I understood something crucial: our bond was deepening in ways that were emotional, delicate, and profoundly human. It was a connection built on trust, on shared vulnerability, and on the subtle, intoxicating tension of being truly seen by someone whose care felt both forbidden and necessary. The next evening arrived with a soft hush, the kind that seems to slow time. Rain tapped gently against the windows, a delicate rhythm that filled the otherwise quiet house. I was curled up on the couch, still tense from the day, and she appeared in the doorway carrying a soft blanket. She smiled, a little playful but tender, and held it out to me. "Here," she said. "You'll feel better with this." I hesitated, but she draped it over my shoulders herself, the fabric warm and comforting. Her fingers brushed my neck and shoulder as she adjusted it, just enough to make me aware of her closeness without forcing intimacy. There was a natural ease in the gesture, a gentle care that spoke louder than words. I felt the steady heat of her hand linger for a heartbeat longer than necessary, and it sent a subtle ripple through me, a mix of comfort, longing, and something more tender that I wasn't ready to name. We settled on the couch together, sitting side by side with just enough space to be comfortable but close enough that our shoulders occasionally brushed. The room smelled faintly of her perfume mixed with the warmth of the wet evening air. The hum of the rain outside and the soft glow of the lamp created an intimate cocoon around us. She passed me a cup of tea, our fingers briefly touching when I took it from her, and that small contact felt electric, even though nothing overt was happening. She glanced at me and gave a small, reassuring smile, her eyes lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "You've had a lot on your mind," she said softly, her voice a soothing murmur. "You don't always have to carry it alone." Her hand brushed my arm as she spoke, casual but deliberate. I felt my chest tighten with a strange mix of gratitude and awareness, every fiber of me conscious of her warmth and presence. As we sat together, silence became a shared language. There was no rush, no pressure, just the quiet intimacy of being near someone who truly understood and cared. Every subtle gesture, from the way she leaned slightly toward me to the occasional brush of her hand against mine, carried weight. I felt safe, seen, and quietly exhilarated all at once. For the first time in weeks, I felt my guard lowering. I could let go of tension, even briefly, and simply exist in the comfort of her presence. It was more than companionship, it was connection, tender and deliberate, a slow-burn intimacy built on trust, care, and subtle, unspoken desire. And in that quiet evening, with rain against the window and the soft warmth of a blanket between us, I realized how profoundly drawn I had become to her, even as I hesitated to name the feelings that were growing stronger with every shared glance and lingering touch. The storm outside had grown heavier, rain drumming steadily against the roof and windows. Inside, the house felt like a sanctuary, a small, warm world separated from the chaos outside. We had been sitting together in the living room for hours, the silence between us comfortable yet charged, each glance and movement carrying more meaning than ever before. A sudden knock at the door startled me, pulling me out of my thoughts. My friend had left something forgotten at school, and I realized I needed to step out briefly to fetch it. She rose with me, her hand brushing lightly against my arm as if anchoring me. That small, grounding touch made my chest tighten, not from alarm, but from the undeniable intimacy that had been growing between us. Back inside, the rain had slowed, leaving a soft patter against the windows. We settled on the couch again, shoulders brushing, our proximity natural and effortless now. There was a pause, a quiet hesitation, before I spoke, my voice low. I don't know how to say this, but I feel something for you. Something I didn't expect. Her eyes softened, and she didn't look away. Instead, she reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering lightly against my cheek. I think I feel it too, she admitted softly, almost a whisper, her voice warm and steady. It's complicated, yes, but it's real. Her words, her honesty, hit me like a gentle wave. The tension we had both been carrying, the unspoken awareness, the lingering glances, the subtle touches, suddenly found voice. I felt a rush of relief and exhilaration, and yet a quiet hesitation too. This wasn't a reckless desire, it was slow, thoughtful, and deeply emotional, rooted in care and understanding. We sat closer, her shoulder brushing mine, fingers occasionally grazing in moments of natural contact. There was no urgency, only awareness, a deliberate, measured closeness that allowed the emotions to breathe. I felt the warmth of her hand resting near mine, the subtle rise and fall of her chest as she spoke softly about worries, dreams, and the complexities of life. Each shared word, each gentle gesture, wove a tapestry of connection that was both tender and electric. By the end of that evening, there was clarity. We both understood the depth of our feelings and the care that underpinned them. It was a moment of mutual realization, a slow, quiet acknowledgement that something rare and profound was growing between us. We didn't need to force it, didn't need to define it beyond the trust and warmth we shared. In that quiet, rain-soaked night, I felt seen, understood, and deeply connected in a way I had never expected, a turning point that promised a love both tender and enduring. The following evening felt calm, almost sacred in its quiet. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside glistening with soft reflections from streetlights and wet leaves. Inside, the house smelled faintly of vanilla and freshly brewed tea, a comforting mix that seemed to embrace us as soon as we entered the living room. The lamp cast a gentle, golden glow across the room, illuminating her face in a way that made her presence feel even more real, even more grounding. We sat on the couch together again, closer than ever, but not in a way that demanded attention or forced intimacy. It was natural, a space carved out for two people who had come to understand one another deeply. Her hand rested lightly on mine, fingers intertwined just enough to create warmth without urgency. Every so often, our shoulders brushed, small gestures that sent quiet waves of reassurance and affection through me. I've never felt anything like this before, I admitted softly, my voice barely above a whisper. It's comforting, and terrifying, and amazing all at once. She smiled, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lamp. That's what it feels like when you allow yourself to trust someone, she said gently. It's not about age, or expectations, or what anyone else thinks. It's about being seen, being cared for, and giving care in return. Her fingers brushed my cheek in a tender, fleeting gesture, and I felt a deep sense of connection, one that went beyond attraction, beyond hesitation. We leaned back, sharing quiet laughter at small, mundane observations, letting our closeness speak in the unspoken language we had built over days of shared moments. Every glance, every gentle touch, every soft word carried meaning, a reminder that love could be subtle, patient, and enduring. The warmth of her presence was grounding, almost like being home in a way I had never known before. At one point, she rested her head lightly on my shoulder, a gesture that was both comforting and intimate. I felt the gentle rise and fall of her breathing, the soft warmth of her cheek against mine, and the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat beneath my hand. It was a moment suspended in time, filled with tenderness, trust, and unspoken promise. As I looked at her, I realized that the journey we had taken together, from curiosity to vulnerability, from tension to understanding, had led to something profoundly beautiful. The age difference, the initial hesitation, the silent questions all dissolved into the simple, undeniable truth of our connection. In her, I had found care, warmth, and a love that was patient and real. That night, with the world quiet around us and the soft glow of the lamp casting gentle shadows, I understood the depth of what we shared. It was a love that didn't need to be hurried, a bond that was tender, mutual, and enduring, and, in that realization, I felt completely, undeniably at home. If this slow burn, age gap romance touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that explore love, longing, and connection in the most unexpected ways. Comment below, would you trust someone the way he did?